Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about something that pilots us, something that often gets a bad rap, and it's just three letters, and it is your ego. What is the ego? I think you'll be fascinated when you hear what the definition is and how it supports us, maybe sometimes how it doesn't, and the misconception that many have about those three letters. We're going to dig into that. We're going into your mind today, with your permission, of course, from an amazing psychologist, and she helps people all the time. She's an author. Just so much insight we get from Dr. Ann Creekmore, who is back with us. Welcome. How you doing today?
Good, Steve. How you doing?
All right, doing all right. The ego. We just say that word, and right away it conjures up potential negativity of somebody with an inflated view of themselves, but not so much is what it is. Why don't we explain? How do you define the ego?
Well, originally, Freud had these concepts that he shared about the personality, the parts of the personality. And that was the id, the ego, and the superego. And of course, things evolve over time. But to define what he was saying was that the id was kind of our base impulses, our primitive impulses, our just desires. And then our ego was our mediator between our just, desires and our superego. Our superego being, in a sense, your conscience, your higher values. And that the ego came to, so you have to, he was going from the idea that you have to kind of tame your ego, with the super ego, you're being socialized and you learn rules to conform and to contain yourself from acting out. And the ego comes along as your reality principle. The id was the pleasure principle, that you're born with desires. The super ego is your conscience to help you control your id or pleasure principle. And the development of the ego is your reality principle, where you kind of take into consideration your needs and then, but then also the needs of society, if you will, or other people. And the ego balances you, is focused on reality. Like, how do you get your needs met in a healthy way, that works for society, not acting out just on desires.
So this came about for me in the realization of all the id and the ego, superego. My friend's daughter, a senior in high school, delivered an essay, and she just read the first paragraph. And there were other students with her, all different topics. She won a scholarship, small scholarship for this.
Oh,
and
right.
I heard the first paragraph, and I was like, wow, all right, I've heard those terms, but I never knew, what they do. Can we look at it this way? My understanding that one of these is the angel on the shoulder. One of these is the devil on the shoulder. One of them is maybe the voice of reason. To look at it that way, which one would be which?
Well, if you're looking at Freudian, it would be
Sure.
like, their base primitive desires untamed would be I guess you could say the devil, if you will, to put it in yours, little devil saying, oh, I want this, I want that, and then the angel would kind of be it could be your super ego. It could, like, well, this is the highest principle, the moral principles, how you should behave. And then the reality principle in between, the reasoning, judgment would be the ego to help you to mediate both of those, what you want and what, your shoulds in life are.
Which one will get you into the most trouble?
What are your thoughts on that?
Is it, I'm trying to remember if it would be the id or would it be the superconscious?
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't necessarily call it the super conscious or this supraconscious. Um, Subconscious, if we're going to define, would be more things that supposedly you don't really, you're not aware of. It's more your unconscious, like things maybe you internalize as a child,
Sure.
or picked up. Say if your parents were angry, maybe you have tendencies to be angry or to see things a certain way, or you were criticized as a child and you had this limiting belief that you're not good enough or whatever that be, could be subconscious. Superconscious sometimes can be thought of as something related, I would think, to the super ego, but almost like some people might call it your divine consciousness, your sacred, space, your something at a higher level. So I would associate that with the more of the super ego. Although super ego, I think, according to Freud, was mostly just rules of society that you're supposed to follow. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah. And is it true that the subconscious is responsible for 90 something percent of everything we do?
Exactly. Your
Crazy.
subconscious, I mean, it would have some of your wants and desires, but it also has a lot of, in a sense, super ego to it when we're talking like this or looking at it conceptually, because it's a lot of what you internalize from your parents and your life experiences that, you develop certain beliefs or you absorb the energy, maybe negative energy from your interactions in your environment as a child. So it kind of has a combo of everything in it. And it is kind of dictating us because we don't even know what it is. We don't know really, it's kind of unconscious. And it's just who we are at a deep level. And we have to go there to try to understand it. I had a quick question though. When you said you've read that article or the first paragraph and she won a scholarship, what was that, what interest, I can tell what you're interested in, but what did she say about it? What was her topic, or what was it that really piques your interest to bring this up? What had she written about in that paragraph exactly?
It was more of the what motivates us to do certain things. And she did, and this is a senior in high school, she tied it to a book, female author, but there was a connection to physical desires in
Yes.
this. And I can't, and the author of this book is not an old, maybe within the last 10, 15 years, somewhere in that
Right.
territory.
Right.
Um, and I unfortunately I can't remember
Okay, that's good.
all the players, meaning the id. I thought there was something called the superconscious, then certainly the ego and how it all comes into play. And she did in the one paragraph paint the picture of one being good, one being not so good, and something writing on top of all of that.
Right, right. Kind of, yes. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that I think we've talked about the Enneagram before. I don't know if you remember this, but in that, the egos, and some people use the word ego as kind of the vices we absorbed, which would kind of be more toward the id, the primitive desire impulses, actually relating, say, to the seven deadly sins. That we have these, that people generally have a chief or primary ego, that or vice or passion that will kind of corrupt us in a sense or control us, that we're motivated by, that isn't really our whole psychological space, which has got the positives, our own good, and but it is something we have to deal with. And it would be things like anger, or it would be lust, or it could be dominance. Is lust really the seven deadly sin is dominating, wanting to do that. Greed,
Hmm.
sloth, all those kind of things would be in those in your ego, considered ego or vice, that you have to kind of realize, well, what are you motivated by? Also, not just your thoughts, beliefs, but your passion, your emotion, and what is the underlying like say some people might be motivated for approval, and that their desire though is to be loved, or that feeling that they aren't lovable, and then they do a lot of things to look good to other people, to be helpers, so that they can get flattery in a sense, or just endorsement or appreciation. And so a lot of their behaviors around feeding that particular quote ego, the ego of the personality type would be 2 in the Enneagram, if you take the Enneagram personality test. But that would be driven by that, versus being just about life and what's happening in your life. Or the vanity ego, you want to look good, vanity, in that case, you want to look good to people. So it's not an authentic relationship who you are. It's just acting a certain way to get approval.
Do you think that out of all of this, the most impactful, I don't want to say most important, but most impactful would be the subconscious, because
Yes.
we don't know what it's doing.
Exactly.
It's kind of scary.
It is, because it's like, what are we really motivated by? And unless we're in therapy, half the time we can't really, we think we're relating to the current event happening in our life at that moment. And really, we're relating to our past. We're like living into fantasy camp where these camera projections are overflowing our reality of the situation. And we're reacting more to our past traumas, our beliefs or decisions we made on the past, than we are to even being in our reality. So often things go awry in what's happening in the present, because we're not in the present, actually. We're subconscious.
It's almost unnerving to know that there's something controlling us. We're controlling us, but we can't control what is controlling us, even though it's us.
Exactly. It's a very good point. And that's why it's so important, versus like, say, try to think about other people's feelings and take a step back and try to then go contemplate or introspect and figure your own feelings and what is being triggered or what's going on with you or why you're doing it, versus just coming out and think it's caused by something external or the interpersonal situation. And get to more of what it is you need to work on yourself all the time. Figure out, how to create good in your life by working on yourself first.
As much as I've learned about the subconscious, I still have question marks. So what is the best way is there a way to take inventory of what's programmed in your mind? Is there ever a way to know what, there's lots going on there, but for the most part?
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
So where we've talked before how the subconscious is piloted by those traumas that we've gone through. And there's different types of trauma. There's the big T trauma, major situations. Sure. Could be the passing of somebody, could be an accident, whatever. Then the little T traumas, which, it could have been something somebody said to you as a kid, or you internalized it, or maybe you got bullied, on the playground. Yes. And it could have been once.
Trauma, just.
Yeah. But all of that, it seems like there's a full, if it was an old school folder of paper in there and each one represents, stuff that we've gone through, it seems like there'd be a lot in your file, your subconscious file, right?
Absolutely. Right. So it's really important to ask yourself, when you're feeling a certain way about a situation, to kind of identify what the real feelings are, happy, sad, scared, angry, variations of the feelings. And then think to yourself, well, when did I feel this way before, growing up or in my life, or, and then what is this kind of bringing up for me, triggering for me, so that you can then, take that out. Or maybe you got to grieve something, just triggering something that's you're in the anger phase of grief about, and you're angry now at the current situation with somebody. It's not even that, it's something from the past that you just never got past anger into feeling sad and grieving and getting it, freeing yourself of it, releasing it.
Hmm.
So you can ask yourself associations as to what. There's a technique where John Gray has couples, the one who wrote Minute from Mars, 1 Minute from Venus, where it has, he calls it love letters. It's like if you're upset with somebody, go write a love letter to them, but it's not a romantic love letter. It's just a letter saying your feelings. I feel sad because, I feel scared because, I feel shocked because, I feel embarrassed because, I feel rejected because. You fill in the blank in your mind. And then they ask yourself, well, what would make me feel good? And a response, an apology letter. Well, what do I need? Like them to say, I'm sorry because of this, and you deserve this. I understand this, And then you can get to the deeper of what it is that's really bothering you. And then you can take it even deeper to heal emotional wounds of the past and go in and say, well, when did I feel this way before? I've clarified what my emotions are, but when did I first feel this way? Like how much of this is actually due to the present little argument we had about the dinner, versus did it go all the way back to childhood dinners, and what I felt having, then, and the hurt or something I felt then. And then that would be more an internal trauma healing, grieving kind of thing to work on versus something to actually talk about in the current situation.
For sure. And you bring back a memory that I did a timeline regression through hypnotherapy. And essentially the practitioner said, think of it was to work on 5 negative emotions. So sadness, pick one of those. And
Right.
you think back to the first time in your life you felt sadness, and took some time, going back in my mind, was it then? I'm not really sure. Then it was almost as if, with your eyes closed and you're viewing a timeline, that the practitioner got me to go above it a little bit and then move back a little bit further and come back down again, just a visual. And, I thought I think I had it. But the result is once you work on it, it wipes out all the other feelings of sadness throughout your entire life.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you're not going to feel sad again, but from the present all the way back should be gone, almost to the point where my analogy is the timeline is somebody standing on a rug and you go and you pull a rug from underneath them.
Exactly.
And it eradicates.
Right. And do you know that, Steve, that Scientology originally, you've heard of Scientology, and that they have a lot of controversy around it being a cult, etc. But Scientology, actually, the core of it, before it kind of got into more of the organizational piece, was that they just wanted you. That's all it is. It just was an encounter with what they called an auditor, where you sat with somebody and the symptoms you're having, big things that they give a good example, a girl who almost drowned when she was like 7 and her father pulled her out of the swimming pool. Well, they just basically had her, she's looking at, well, why is she so dependent and why is she so afraid of water or whatever it was? I can't remember. But basically it went back to the first original memory of being actually drowning in the pool. Oof. And hearing things like some people calling, she's going to drown, she can't breathe, and all that coming up and always triggered and running through her mind, and her father pulling her out and saving her. So, she's got this dependency, fear about not being without him. And that was the kind of thing that originally, before it progressed, and still, I'm sure, is the basis of it, was just to help people go back to what they called it the basic, just like you're saying, the basic memory. Like you're trying to go back to your original memory. And then once you get to that original memory, then it ends up healing all the preceding memories that were just kind of layers or reenactments of it.
Wow.
And that's essentially, too, very Freudian, the unconscious. The whole idea of psychoanalysis was that just let the person come in, lay on the couch, right? Start talking about free association, as they called it, things coming up till they got to these unconscious experiences and beliefs and emotions, and then can express them, release them, and understand them, with the reality principle in the sense, um, and so yeah, so it would get into that deep subconscious, unconscious layer, and would heal all the other later
Wow.
experience.
There's so much that we've gone through in our lives that is just sitting inside that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Why should we argue with anyone? We got plenty of things to heal and hope.
Seriously,
It won't help us anyway. We got to heal ourselves.
it almost, in a
Release it.
way, it almost amazes me that we function the way we do and move forward to some great degree, considering all we're dealing with, all
Exactly.
we've dealt with, over the years. And could you imagine if every one of us in a perfect world were able to address those traumas from our past, work on them, eradicate them, work through them,
Yes,
whatever,
absolutely.
what our lives would be like?
Absolutely. That's why, really, for us to just spend the time taking care of ourselves, nurturing ourselves, getting some time in the day, mind, body, spirit, spending time in our own meditation, our own contemplation, our own healing, our own getting ourselves up to feelings of good and loving ourselves. And we could just spend our time doing that, and then take care of the basic responsibilities of life, and everybody be doing better instead of arguing on projecting out their anger at something that probably goes just to a past they had nothing to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So, final thoughts on the subconscious. What do you think is one of top two modalities to know what's going on in your subconscious and to work with them?
Well, I think we brought them up today. One, of course, or maybe three even now, doing our own personal contemplation, and just being with our thoughts, meditation, just seeing what flows through, what
Sure.
comes up, and owning our own stuff when we get upset or angry, not thinking about the current, but trying to go within to see where it comes from. We can do that just on our own through associations and contemplation, meditation, but also through therapy, psychotherapy, like you're saying, and then the regression hypnosis type, where that you're going back to the times,
Yeah.
and anything that has you kind of look back and heal would be grief work. Those are some that I would think of.
Yeah.
And any others you think of?
The hypnotherapy for me was impactful.
Uh-huh.
Energy healing, of course, but even before
Yes.
all of that, traditional talk therapy that just kind of get a baseline, a feel, that to me, that's the foundation. And then this other stuff sits on top of it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a whole field of psychology or type of therapy called psychodynamic therapy, and kind of based on psychoanalysis, Freudian, that is just focuses on just bringing up the past too. Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, there's a great chapter in your book, Love Your Life, Love Yourself, about feeling your feelings. And that's what I believe you're talking about with just meditating, thinking, and feeling the feeling that's in your subconscious, and then knowing from there, you got to deal with it, and move your life forward. How do we find you? What's the best way to locate you?
And the easiest way is just, you can find me too so I never mentioned this, but on Psychology Today, you just look me up. A lot of people find me for therapy that way on Psychology Today. It has a directory of a lot of therapists you can get in touch with, but my own website is psychologistinvirginia.com, all spelled out with a plural, psychologistinvirginia.com. It's got my numbers and all about my therapy and everything in
Sure.
it.
And also details about your books too.
Exactly.
Great talking with you today. Thanks for unpacking this. It's a little deeper today, but
Thank you.
it's what drives us. So we should know about it.
It's wonderful. Thank you for all
Yeah.
your insights and
Well, thank
getting us
you.
to focus on that.
And we'll talk soon, okay?
Yes.
Thanks.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.